human nature is when something bad happens to become a victim, right? Victimhood is dangerous.
Yeah.
Because victimhood basically says what happened, the negative thing that happened to me defines who I am,
Right.
right? And it's something that Judaism is stridently against victimhood.
I think so much of it is the identity that we place on ourselves. If we put all of the weight in our story, in what we went through, what we continue to go through, that is going to become who we become. But if we instead choose to not necessarily forget about it, not necessarily put it off to the side, but change the identity of who we want to be, I think that is an absolute game changer.
Today, we're honored to have Brandon Farbstein, somebody who we all have something to learn from. Absolutely, every person listening is going to learn some amazing things about how to deal with issues in their life. Brandon was diagnosed with a very rare form of dwarfism. There's less than 100 people in the world that have it. But instead of curling up in bed, right, and instead of becoming bitter and angry, he's become a real force in the world. Somebody who's a fantastic, motivational, inspirational speaker. He's actually had 2 laws written into the books in Virginia about bullying, something that he endured a lot of, as you can imagine. So given that we live in an age where looks are everything, right, and content is nothing, where it's how many likes you have on Instagram, how many followers you have on Facebook, and nobody seems to go beyond the surface, here's somebody who can really teach us a lot. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you so much, David. I'm honored to be with you.
So your story is you're the person who defeated dwarfism. That's what people say about you. But tell us something about you that isn't in the headlines.
Oh, that's a good question. I would say really the resilience beyond overcoming adversity. Every single day, I have to live in a world not built for somebody like myself, and needing to overcome that and not just beat it, but make the most of it and use it for good, I think is something that is the real Brandon, beyond the motivational speaker, beyond the author, any of the titles or labels. That's who I am at my core.
And give us some examples of what you mean when you say difficulties in life that you may not be aware of if you're not like me.
Absolutely. So what you may not be able to tell on camera, I stand 3'9", as you could see, David. And so really this is what I call an average height world. Things like going to the coffee shop and ordering and needing to even get somebody's attention, or how I'm treated on a daily basis, being dehumanized, and having people look at me like I'm some creature, or equating to what you would see in the movies, somebody with dwarfism, like an Oompa Loompa or an elf or something that, again, is kind of subhuman. And so needing to really prove myself, not when it comes to accolades or any of those things, but proving that I'm a human being just as much as you are, just as much as anybody else. I think that's the biggest task that I have on a daily basis, and something that I'm really working towards, especially now that I have this sense of visibility that I try and use as much as possible. I think that's the biggest thing that changes perceptions, because one doesn't necessarily see someone who looks like me on a daily basis. So I think every interaction, every time I pass somebody on the street, in the airport, wherever it might be, that is enough to sometimes be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize somebody who stands under 4 feet tall can be driving a car or being successful or any of those things. And so it's certainly very challenging, but I try and do as much as I can to be visible for that reason.
So we all have incidents in life where we're sort of slighted, right? I recently was someplace and somebody said, you really came out fat on the screen. And, and we're humans, so we're hurt.
Right.
Now, you deal with things that everything we deal with, you deal with them on a squared basis. How do you react to being slighted, even accidentally, because
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of it is accidental. How do you deal with it? Like, so that we could use that for our lives.
It's so hard. And I think I really have to remind myself to pause and take a step back as much as I possibly can. But at the same time, going back to the human piece, I'm human and I'm going to overreact, or I'm going to get angry or sad or filled with despair in those moments. And sometimes you just have to let yourself kind of ride that roller coaster and let it go back to the station before you could be like, okay, well, what do I do now? And so I think really it's about remembering, just like you said, that for the most part, I think humans are good. I think we all are coming from a place that isn't necessarily trying to spread malice or be mean. But at the same time, we do these things that kind of slip out sometimes. And being able to remember that I've been able to get through every single one of those moments to get me to this current moment is so important. And I think that's universal too.
How do you do it? Teach us
It's
teach us the secret sauce. We all need some of it.
I think it's changing your focus. If you focus solely on that one interaction or that one person who's ignorant, who's small minded, then that is going to be your entire worldview. But if you're able to, as much as you possibly can, press that pause button and genuinely be able to take a step back to say, this is one horrible person or this is one interaction, and that does not define the rest of the world. So I think for me, it's really been about focusing on what I can do, because I have no control over how people react to me or the pointing or the pictures or the laughing or any of those things, but I can control what I do about it. And I think for me, that has given a really incredible sense of purpose and meaning to my life, because that's going to be the constant. And when you are as obviously different as I am, I can't just go to the grocery store. I can't just blend in. And so me being able to slightly shift my focus as much as possible, it makes a world of a difference, truly.
So zoom out. That's the
Hmm.
idea. I once heard a story where a wise man who had a son who in the end died. He was actually by me. Somebody had a son died. And he went to of a brain tumor. And he went to an old rabbi and he said, Rabbi, how do I deal with my pain? So the rabbi looked a little blank. He said, Rabbi, how do you deal when you have pain? So the rabbi looked at him and he says, oh, I've never had pain in my life. He said, how is that possible? He said, think of it this way. If you drop a pebble in a glass of water, it makes ripples of water. But if you drop a huge boulder into the Atlantic Ocean, it just disappears.
Mm.
So he says, are you a glass of water or are you the Atlantic Ocean?
I love that. That's so powerful.
Yeah. So that's what you're saying. There are horrible people in the world.
Hmm.
And there are callous people in the world. There are uncaring people in the world.
Yeah.
And zoom out and look at all the kind people in the world. And it's inevitable that there are going to be some jerks.
Yes. And it doesn't make any of the horrible things go away. Doesn't make any of the cruelty in the snap of a finger just disappear. But when you are able to focus on what you can do and the amount of control that you have, which is solely your words, your thoughts, your actions, that I think gives a complete sense of being able to do something. No matter who we are or what we deal with, we all have those moments, and we all need to be able to not let that define us.
That's fabulous. So when you're growing up, you don't reach this level of maturity. Doesn't happen overnight. Tell me about a turning point in your life when you realize that you're not an injured victim, but you actually have a mission.
I think
When did you become the mothers against drunken driving, who instead of becoming victims,
Yeah.
change the world?
that
Uh, uh,
probably first came to me at around 15 years old. I had the opportunity to share my story for the first time, and it was on the TEDx stage. So it was in front of about 2,000 people, and just a 6-minute, very short talk. But it was in that moment that I found this sense of purpose and mission that I never knew was out there for me. And the way that that all came about, I met a woman in the airport who saw me on my Segway mobility device, which at the time was this bright yellow. It kind of looked like a Transformer or a Lamborghini, so it drew a lot of attention. And this woman was very intrigued. She said, "What is this device? What do you use it for? What condition do you have?" I could tell she was genuinely curious instead of coming from a place of trying to be rude or trying to be ignorant. And as a 15-year-old, I had two choices. I could be a normal teenager and not give her any of my attention or any time of day, or I could answer her questions and have a conversation with somebody who is a complete stranger. And I chose the latter. And the conversation started from about 3 minutes in line at TSA and then led to about 45 minutes of conversation because she was on our family's flight. And it turns out this woman ended up being one of the original organizers of TEDx conferences. I believe she was number 3 or 4 in the world. And the event that she put on was TEDx NASA, of all things, which was very cool to me. And I was a bit of a geek where I watched TED Talks all the time during my free time and at home. And it was always a huge goal of mine to one day share my story on that platform, but never knew how that would be possible or how I would make it happen. And she ended up getting me on that stage a few months later. And quite literally, it led to the rest of my life. That was about 11 years ago. And I've been following that mission ever since, which is, I think, just such a gift, because it gave me a sense of why God put me here, why I deal with the things that I do, because I'm able to show other people that you get to define your life. You don't have to be labeled. You don't have to be limited by what's handed to you. It's up to you to make the most of it and do something with it.
Excuse me for saying this, and if I have to be careful when I speak because sometimes it's hard to tune into somebody else's pain. But many people struggle with why bad things happen to good people.
Yes.
And what you said may be one of the answers, because the good person can use that bad thing to light up the world in a way that he never would have been able to had a bad thing never happened to him.
Absolutely. And I think it gives you a different sense of the lens that you see life through, because truly pain is universal. Adversity, all these things, you don't have to be somebody like me that is dealing with sometimes extreme forms of adversity. That is the constant in life. We are all going to experience it. There's nothing that we could do to prevent it from happening. And ultimately, the choice is ours, what we end up doing with it. And you don't necessarily need to go and become some motivational speaker or any of that to do something. Sometimes it's as simple as making others feel comfortable in their skin. And by simply being yourself around your friends, your family, your loved ones, that is an extreme act of showing other people that they could do the exact same thing.
So everybody is made b'tselem Elokim, in the image of God. Do you feel that your image of God was given to you really as a mission? My image of God is going to be the person who shows people how to deal with adversity and pain.
I do. I absolutely believe that. Every bit of what I had to go through, especially as a kid, I think really enabled me to have this sense of deep empathy and see that, yes, I deal with a unique set of circumstances, but it genuinely is universal, and it is something that we all have to experience in life. And I used to resent every bit of being who I am. And I said, when I reached 11 years old, that I was so angry at God. I was angry at my parents even for creating me. And I thought that there was no point in me being here. And I think I also had to go through being at the lowest of lows to recognize what I actually had in terms of my capabilities and my inner strength. And without that, I think it completely would have changed the trajectory of what I've been able to do.
So teach us this. Human nature is when something bad happens to become a victim,
Mm-hmm.
right? Victimhood is dangerous
Yeah.
because victimhood basically says what happened, the negative thing that happened to me defines who I am,
Right.
right? And it's something that Judaism is stridently against victimhood.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we look at a substantial amount of the Jews in this country's parents came here in the last 100 years,
Yep.
many after the Holocaust. And those that didn't come after the Holocaust were running away from pogroms in Russia,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they could have accepted the mantle of victimhood,
Yes.
as other people have, right? But they rejected it, and people who came, I actually have two brothers-in-law whose parents came from the war. Their parents lost all their, they were married with children. They lost their spouses with the children. They came back and they didn't go to therapists. They went straight to work
Wow.
and they rebuilt their families. And so how does somebody avoid the mantle of victimhood?
I think so much of it is the identity that we place on ourselves. If we put all of the weight in our story, in what we went through, what we continue to go through, that is going to become who we become. But if we instead choose to not necessarily forget about it, not necessarily put it off to the side, but change the identity of who we want to be, I think that is an absolute game changer. And again, it's not so often as easy as I'm just going to do it and it's magically going to happen. But being able to really surround yourself also with people that aren't always bringing up, oh, it's so sad what you went through. It must be so hard living the life that you have. But instead, people that push you towards strength and empowerment and really making that inner choice to say, my identity is not what I went through. My identity is not the label that I have, survivor, victim, person with a disability. That is part of who I am, but that's not everything that I am.
So it sounds to me like you're suggesting that we need an inner narrative. And what is the narrative we tell ourselves? Is the narrative we tell ourselves a narrative of loss, of suffering, of struggle? Or is the narrative we tell ourselves is the part of self, and everybody has a part, that's successful, that's positive, that's kind, that's loving,
Yeah.
that's good, that's a good son, a good brother, a good husband, a good child? But what you're saying is everybody needs a narrative.
Yes. And you have to make the voice inside your head louder than any external noise, because ultimately that's what drives your life. If you're constantly telling yourself this story of, I'm a victim, I hate who I am so angry at what I've been through, that is going to be how you feel constantly. And again, it's not trying to be like delusional and act like none of those things are real or they didn't happen, but it's instead really choosing to make the voice inside your head, that inner narrative, one that pushes you towards who you ultimately want to be, which again is so incredibly hard sometimes, but it's a choice that every single one of us has. And it's a daily choice that we have to make. The first thing that we wake up in the morning, the last thing that we say to ourselves when we go to sleep, it has to be a voice that's pushing us towards that person that we want to be, instead of a very disempowering or angry or bitter person that sometimes can really take over.
So it's interesting. We all recognize the need to eat well. Most of us, some of us do. The need to exercise, some of us do. But there's one exercise that most people neglect. And that is, instead of doing 20 push-ups before you go to sleep, sit down and tell yourself the narrative of who you are and what happened to you that day in a narrative that is positive.
Yeah. And I feel like that is one of those skills that you can't be taught. You have to really learn it for yourself. And that is where I also believe going through extreme adversity and having to overcome these things that are sometimes very life-altering or even life-limiting if you let them. But realizing that it's truly up to us to create the life that we want. And I'm really not trying to sound like some super inspirational figure that has it all figured out. I'm not. 26, I'm figuring it out every single day of my life. But at the same time, I know what I don't want to be. I don't want to be that 11-year-old kid anymore, ever again, who hated every aspect of my life. And I still have those moments where I wish things would be different, or I wish I wouldn't have to deal with cruelty or hate or pain, whether it's physical or emotional. But at the same time, I think it ultimately has led me to be this Brandon that is now in the world and showing other people exactly how they could do the same.
That's fabulous. Do you see any similarity with who you are and the story of the Jewish people? Constantly, from the beginning of time, harassed, attacked, rights taken away from. I mean, in America we have it good, but the last 2,000 years have been basically, there hasn't been a single 100-year century in the entire time that there haven't been pogroms
Yes.
of one sort or another, mass murders, etc. And yet, there's no sense of victimhood. Here's a startling thing. Israel's largest trading partner, I don't know if it's this year necessarily, but for decades, was Germany. I mean, you would think the country that had just killed 2/3 of all the Jews in the world, or half of all the Jews in the world, would have been sort of the pariah state,
Right.
and let all that anger and bitterness and hate just fester. And instead, Israel said, we move on. And they became their largest trading partner. So there's something about moving on after destruction and chaos that sort of mimics your story a little, doesn't it?
I think so too, very much so. And I don't think I realized that until a few years ago. Not that I wasn't proud to be a Jew, but it's that I didn't fully understand it. I didn't fully embrace my sense of Jewish identity and Jewish pride. And realizing the similarities and the deep roots of resilience and having to overcome extreme obstacles that show up constantly, I think my story and the Jewish story are so intertwined. And that's another reason why, especially in recent years, I've fully embraced my Jewish identity to a point where I'm so loud and proud to be Jewish. And I think that's something that we all have in common too, where if it wasn't for the deep-rooted resilience, if it wasn't for our ancestors being able to say, yes, this happened to me, but what now? None of us would be here. And it gives me a sense of responsibility as well, not only as a Jew, but as a whole human being, to be able to use every bit of what I have and who I am. And that, I think, is something that we all share as well.
Yep. I go to Israel every now and then, and I know every time I go to Israel, I notice one thing. The skies are full of cranes.
Yeah.
There's constant construction. In middle, there are Iranian missiles coming in, and they're building new buildings. This endless optimism and a sense of, for 80 years, Israel has been at war, and for 80 years, it's been building.
Right.
And it's sort of a story of the human life. Like many of us, if you get a job at the post office, you don't have these issues.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody who's trying to make a difference is always at war.
Mm-hmm.
And we could wait until things quiet down before we start building, or we could say, we build while the missiles are incoming.
Yes.
And that's something that you identify with.
Very much so. And it's saying not necessarily so what, but what now? And that is something that we all have to continue facing. And I think even the people that work at the post office, or even people that have any sort of human experience, deal with that as well, because we don't necessarily have the ability to have this like snowplow in front of us, constantly getting all the boulders, constantly getting all the adversity and the pain away from us. But we can always say, what now? What do I do with this experience? What do I do with tomorrow's experience? And that is that inner source of strength and resilience.
So, talk about resilience. You mentioned one thing. You said you zoom out. Do you have any other hacks? Somebody got really knocked down. They got either humiliated, or they got lost a big job, lost a big deal, lost a big date. There's so many different ones. Lost a big relation. Somebody died. A parent, God forbid, a child. Talk to us a little bit. What are some of the hacks you use to be so resilient?
One of the things that genuinely changed my life was getting therapy and being able to learn that it's this imagery that I was first taught when I was 11, that there's always going to be clouds. Sometimes the cloud that is full of rain and a bad storm is going to linger for a few minutes, for days, for weeks at a time, but that cloud always passes. And the next cloud, or think of it like waves, the next wave is coming. And always knowing that we're able to, I don't want to say make the most of the experience that we have, but really help other people and be in service with what we've gone through. And in my opinion, it's the people that have experienced the worst kinds of pain, the worst sorts of situations that you can imagine, that are the most helpful, because those are the ones that have this true sense of empathy, this true sense of compassion. And sometimes that is exactly what we need to recognize. I have to be in this moment. I have to feel the feelings that I'm dealing with, but then be able to move on from them. And seeing other people's stories, seeing how they were able to do it, I think was something, especially as a child, that completely changed the way that I view myself and what I was dealing with. And also recognizing that we have so much in common with other folks, even if on the surface it looks like our lives are completely different. I really believe that we are more alike than we are different. And having that sense of recognizing yourself in somebody else's journey, in somebody else's story or pain, I think also is something that we have to do more of. In the world that we live in right now, we are so divided. It is so incredibly polarized. And having that sense of seeing ourself in another person, I think is huge. But something else, especially with social media, could be really easy to lose your own image, to lose your sense of self, and to try and conform to what you think you need to be, how you need to show up, getting more followers or more likes, or all these things that unfortunately produce this artificial sense of self. But I think being able to remember who you are at your core in this time especially is absolutely vital.
Social media, all in all, a negative or a positive to the people?
I would say both. I've experienced the worst of the worst. I've been told, midget, go kill yourself. You're the ugliest thing that I've ever seen. But I've also had...
And when you hear that, what do you respond?
I don't.
In your mind, how do you respond?
I'm angry as hell. Sometimes it stops me in my tracks. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this person must be in so much pain for them to say such a disgusting, cruel comment to me. But sometimes it really gets to me. And I think I have both of those experiences, sometimes at the same time even. But also, I know that it has nothing to do with me. It's somebody else projecting. It's somebody else taking whatever they are facing or experiencing and trying to take that out on somebody who's an easy target like myself. But I also have the opposite, where I have messages from people saying, because of you, because of your story, I no longer want to end my life, or I want to continue being here.
Wow.
And that is, it's so full circle, because I nearly let the words and the comments of, especially when I was in high school, I was very severely cyberbullied, and I let that become my inner narrative. And it was very easy to feed into that, and very easy to get lost in what other people thought of me.
In their narrative, not in your narrative.
Exactly. But being able to, again, zoom out and take that step back to say, this is not me, this has everything to do with them, doesn't make the hurt just all of a sudden stop, but it gives you this sense of why. And I'm somebody that is a very deep thinker. I'm always in my head, I think both for the good and for the bad. And especially as a teenager, that got to me quite a lot, because I thought I was doing something wrong. I thought that I had to leave social media completely and basically hide. But that wasn't the answer either. And I think being online and even having any sort of social media connects us if we let it, or it will completely ruin us and get in our head in a sense where we lose ourselves. So that's really up to us in how we use it. It's a tool. And if we use that tool for good, again, you don't need to be some inspirational figure or whatnot, but if you use it to connect with people that love you, that support you, that are posting things that are positive and not being cruel and horrible people, then I think that changes how we feel about ourselves, especially my generation, because we've gotten so lost in this false sense of self and identity where we think we need to be somebody that we are not in order to become an influencer, in order to get likes, or in order to get attention, or whatever that is. And I think that is incredibly dangerous.
What do you think of, you spoke about zooming out, you spoke about creating your own narrative. What do you think about a Jewish idea? A biblical, by the way, the idea of a narrative, Zeh Sefer told us, Adam, the Bible actually tells us everybody is their own book.
I love that.
Yeah. And you write the story of your own book.
Yes.
And when we allow others to influence us, right, we're actually creating, instead of an autobiography, it's becoming a biography written by somebody else. Mm-hmm. And our struggle is, how do we make it an autobiography?
Right.
Right? But I lost my thought. That's why we're not live. Let's go to a second.
That happens to me all the time, including when I'm on stage in front of 5,000 people.
Okay, so I'll just skip over it. How did that TEDx talk work out, by the way?
It was like, how did it happen?
No. What was the effect?
So right as I got off stage, I had people coming up to me that were decades older. So I was 15, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s with tears in their eyes saying, I was bullied too, or I've always felt different, and you don't know how much it means to me to hear you and watch you on a stage like that. And I think I pretty instantly recognized that people didn't need to be in my shoes in order to see themselves in some part of my journey. And that was completely life-changing for me, because that really got me on this path of continuing to do that, be in front of audiences that I thought I had nothing in common with, but having such resonance, having such unity and deep empathy for each other. Even if I didn't know what they were going through, having somebody come up to me afterwards and clearly be so moved made me feel like, wow, I need to continue doing this. And I never realized that this was not only a career path, but a life path. And it was...
Because I think it's so believable. Like if you turn on any TV, and you're going to see some stunning Hollywood actress talk about all the trouble she's had in her life, all the bullying she's had, and all the guys who said no to her, and just look at it, you say, like, really? Like all this BS, you know what I mean? But when you say it, people say it's true.
Yes. And that's exactly what I think pushed me to keep trying to be visible and sharing my story, whether it was in schools, it was in front of companies, conferences, that I didn't even know there
Every
were.
supermodel is going to tell you how boys didn't want to date her.
Yes.
And you just look at it, you say, come on.
Right.
So there's another Jewish concept, which is a little bit different, and it's Kol ha'olam nivra b'shvili. The world was created just for me, and the only opinion that I really have to worry about is my own. Like, to a certain extent, Abraham was called Abraham the Ivriite, and the explanation, the Talmud explains, he says, I'm on one side of the world, and everybody else is of the river, and everybody else is on the other side.
Right.
So he's like the first dissenter of humanity. But the idea being somebody says, look, the only opinion that really matters of how I'm doing is my own opinion.
Yes.
In fact, psychologically, I forgot the name of the psychologist, did a study, and he said human beings have no idea how to measure themselves up, and the only way they know how to do it is by comparing themselves to peers. And that's the only way they can measure.
Yeah.
And Abraham basically said, no. The only measuring stick, the only yardstick you should have is you against the younger you. You versus the older you. And nobody's opinion matters a whit.
Yeah.
So it's a different...
It's so powerful.
What do you think of that idea?
I live it every single day because I am constantly getting these judging looks or people reacting in a very negative way oftentimes. And if I let that become how I see myself, whether it's my self-image, my self-worth, then that is going to completely change my worldview for the worse. But if I'm able to say, not that it doesn't have an effect or not that it doesn't matter, because again, I can't necessarily, just like all of us, can't let a cruel word or a cruel experience just roll off all the time. But being able to remember that no matter what somebody is going to do to you, no matter what they're going to say, you are still you. And nobody can take that away from you. I think that is one of those things that we all can relate to as well, not letting your self-worth or the judgment that you have from other people turn into how you see yourself.
So here's a very unfair question, and if you want, we'll take it out, but it's just really unfair. If you could wake up tomorrow at average height, but it meant erasing the effect you've had on the world, the effect you will have on the world, right? The people whose lives you've changed, like the person who didn't commit suicide, probably more than one, the relationships and the purpose his life gave you, would you take it or not?
It's a hard question, but the answer is easy. No. I would not change it. I have really crappy days sometimes, and I have moments where I do wish I could press pause on what I'm experiencing and say, what would life be like at 6.5 feet tall? But ultimately, I recognize that the reason God put me here is to help alleviate other people's pain. And I don't think I would be able to do that in any comparison if I didn't have exactly what I had wrong with me, quote unquote, and I didn't deal with what I have to deal with.
Wow. All I could say is, wow, that's amazing. In other words, you would not change your life for Mr. 6.5 feet, John Pizzarelli, who comes home every day, watches a couple of Netflix, goes to bed, and, repeat the next day, rinse and repeat.
Yeah. I would not.
Yeah. What's one truth about human worth you had to suffer to learn that the rest of us should get to learn? What's our audience, one truth that you have recognized that you wish everybody listening here would know?
I think without pain, there is no resilience. There is no courage. There is no bravery. You have to experience some of the worst moments in life in order to really tap into what you have inside. And even the story of when I wanted to end my life, and I was moments away from that. I don't think I would be able to do all the things that came after, not even on the professional side, on the personal side. I don't think I'd have the sense of inner worth without cultivating that by being genuinely broken and brick by brick going to therapy, going to 6 different therapists to finally find one that I felt validated by, I don't think I'd know exactly what I was capable of without that. And I think that's the same for all of us, that you have to be broken. You have to sometimes be at your lowest point where you feel like everything is failing. You have nothing left, to recognize, actually, I do. I have so much to live for. I have so much that I've been able to overcome, and I have such a bright future ahead of me. But I have to cultivate that for myself, because nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody's going to hand you this sense of self-worth or inner confidence or the voice inside your head that is empowering. You have to work through it. You have to go through what life and what God hands to you so that you're able to get to the other side and both help yourself and help the world in the process as well.
Wow. Brandon Farbstein, my teacher, probably taught a lot of you something very valuable today too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.